Good morning, everyone. Hope you are well and ready to listen. Yes, I can.
Okay, Louise, why don't you go ahead and get started? Set up your broadcast, and we'll see if we can get this working.
Well, of course, the broadcast is mental health in your neighborhood, and all of us need to pay attention to our mental health, yours and mine, and those people around us. So I was believing that you would have a topic because you always do like to have a topic when we communicate on the computer.
Yes, and what is still impacting my own life is what's happening in Russia and the impact of all Ukraine and all over the world. So that's what's been weighing heavily on my heart and on my mind. What about you?
Yes, well, it impacts me as well. I'm saddened by the fact that so many mothers and children and even babies are killed with bombs.
Right. I've seen so many and watched so many stories of children running,
Hmm.
and all you see are their parents and them on the
Right,
ground,
right.
and they're gone, and their suitcases are right beside them. So it's difficult to watch it. And so, as we talk about mental health in our neighborhood, I think uh, binging, if that's the term, binging on the news. The other day when I came home, I wanted to watch the news to get caught up, but then I said to myself, I need to give myself some space, and I
Mhm.
decided not to watch it. What about you? Are you trying to determine how many hours you can or cannot watch this? Because some people can just sit home and just watch it all day.
I am watching a great deal of it because I'm feeling very saddened by what I'm seeing, but I'm also uh, anxious to hear uh, what some of the ideas are that could save Ukraine in some way.
Right. Well, what would they be? What would be some of those ideas?
Well, of course, they have to provide the men in the Ukraine with weapons because they may or may not have the weapons. They may not know how to use them. And so I think that we should provide that. And I know that all of the husbands, fathers, grandfathers up to age 60 have said goodbye to the women and children as they moved off to Poland and other countries. And it's very sad for them to have to say goodbye, but then very anxious to be sure that their children remain alive.
Well, Louise, how do you deal with something like that? for example, just because you have armament, just because you are going to be able to go to war and take somebody said that some of the people over there were actually using their um, the guns that they use to hunt. They aren't automatic weapons.
Right,
They're single shot rifles that they're using. So how can you do that? How can you go to war when you haven't even been trained? For example, if I had to pick up a gun and go fight for my country, but if I wasn't trained, I I would. I'm struggling to be able to shoot somebody. You have to be trained. Your whole orientation. We've been trained as citizens, as people in the city. We've been trained not to kill anybody, not to shoot anybody. Don't hurt anybody. So
right,
you can't send me to war without changing my whole mindset because
right,
if I go, I'm going to end up letting somebody take advantage of me. You know,
right.
so
Hmm.
and people could have a breakdown recognizing that okay, I'm going to war and I'm going to have to shoot to kill somebody and I don't want to do that. So you have to be trained. So how are these men who have to say goodbye to their families who are
Hmm.
rushing off to war? A
Hmm.
lot of them have not been prepared.
I know. And as a matter of fact, Pastor, one day last week, someone was being photographed with their gun, and they had their gun upside down
Wow.
with the part of the gun that you put your finger in to pull the trigger was
Yeah.
on the top. I mean, it was only a few seconds
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
that I could see it. But I know how guns should be used, and that was totally wrong. So that would be a problem for someone if they were
I have an
attempting to
emergency.
use that gun
Yes.
and not be able to use it properly.
Makes great sense, Deacon. I'm actually here assisting as well.
Hmm.
Pastor had to step
Hmm.
away for a moment, but I totally understand what you're saying, and that makes it's just sad. I mean, as I'm watching it, it's very grievous and it is disturbing, and to see. Um,
So I'm wondering what other people who are watching the broadcast might think of
mhm.
what you and I have said already about the guns.
Yes.
And I know that you're on the phone, so I'm assuming that somebody called in.
No, not as of yet. But I'll be monitoring that. I'm actually behind the scenes, just
So it would
enjoying.
be good to know if you could share what the person that called about.
Yeah, no one actually called Deacon as of yet. I'm just I'm here
Okay.
engineering behind the scenes. But
I'm still waiting,
can you hear me,
but
Deacon?
that happens a lot.
Can you hear me, Deacon?
Yeah, I'm curious about whether or not the person who just called had something to say about the broadcast.
What do you mean, a person who just called?
Did that person have something to say about what you and I were talking about?
How did you know that somebody called?
Because I saw that you picked up the phone and had it on your ear and you took your headphones off.
That was my wife.
Ah, okay, okay. Well, that was an important call.
Absolutely.
Yes,
One of the most important calls that I could take today.
yes.
So let's go back to I don't know where you and Pastor Hobbs were going, but you were saying that a person had a rifle and they had it upside down.
They
So
had it upside down, right. And I don't know whether someone had given them the gun and they set it up to use it, but they had it upside down and they might have done the wrong thing with it and ended up being shot themselves.
right, right,
Because I know how to manage guns and rifles,
right.
and that was totally wrong.
Well, so that's one of my concerns. is, for example, if you're a reservist,
Hmm.
if you're in the National Guard, you periodically you go for additional training and training and training.
Right.
But the
Hmm.
average person who is not familiar with a gun, who has to go up against somebody, Russian servicemen and women who know how to fight, who know how to fight with a knife, who know how to track somebody, who know what's a lethal blow against a person's body. The average
Hmm.
person doesn't know that, Louise. So I struggle with thinking about how the the people who are fighting who have not been trained, because I think a lot of them, like you were saying, you see people, men, saying goodbye to their families, and
Hmm.
and they're picking up a gun or being given a gun and they're going to fight. They're angry. They're emotionally struggling. They're angry,
Yes.
and so
Right.
they might say, like maybe they've had a bar fight, but not something like this with trained
Right. Right.
people. So how do you prepare? How do you help people with this emotional struggle that they're going through? Because they could end up being killed because
I know.
they're not prepared.
And some of what I have seen on Facebook and on the news is that many of the Russian were not prepared for what they were ordered to do in Ukraine because they didn't know that Russia wanted to take over Ukraine, and many of them just came in and got killed themselves.
Okay, so what I understand about that is that these men and women were told that they were going to be on maneuvers,
Hmm.
which my understanding of that, and I could be
Right.
wrong, is training.
Right.
They're being trained, and so going on maneuvers and being trained is a whole lot different than the average person from the Ukraine who has never gone on maneuvers,
Right.
who doesn't know anything about nuclear weapons or how to drive a tank. I remember seeing some photos of a tank that it wasn't moving, and they said a group of farmers were trying to
Hmm.
figure out how to operate it.
Right.
And
Right.
I've never seen the inside of a tank, but I'm challenged sometimes just trying to figure out how to operate my car with all of the new technology that's in it, let alone trying to figure out how to operate
Mm.
a tank with weapons on the inside. I might want to be shooting at an object ahead of me, and I end up pressing the wrong button, and I shoot something behind me. So again,
Well,
go ahead.
that's perfectly normal for the way I think because I just bought a 2021 Prius, and
Sh-
inside the
show
car
off, show off.
on the but on the dashboard there are a number of different opportunities that I have to use to do different things within the car that I am still learning about, and
Right.
I've only had the car a few months.
Well, there's
But
something.
what I'm saying is I agree with what you're saying about being put in a a particular kind of a piece of equipment and not knowing how to use it, and how different that would be and how difficult it would be for someone to try and do what they're supposed to be doing when they don't know how to use a tank, they don't know how to use um, some of the equipment that the United States has passed off to them. There's a lot of that that they have to learn about because they need to be They need to be given the equipment to use, but they also need to be taught how to use it.
Makes sense, Deacon. I'm back again,
I
Pastor.
think that you would agree with that,
I do agree with that. I do.
but you're on the phone again.
Yes, Pastor's on the phone. I'm actually having to fill in for him in the interim. Can you hear me?
Okay, Pastor Hobbs, I didn't know that
Hey, no
you were,
worries.
you were sitting across from him. That's very good.
Yes,
That's
yes,
good. Well, you were listening to what the conversation that we were having,
yes.
and what were you thinking?
I agree. It's very challenging for people who don't, who aren't equipped, who aren't trained to be able to quickly have that learning curve and to be able to defend themselves. But I bless them for the efforts and for.
I can't hear you very well.
Okay.
I can hear him, and he was saying, he was just saying, God, God bless them for their efforts. Um, there was a piece that you were saying that really um, opened up another avenue of thinking, and I can't get back there. I can't figure out what it was. We were talking about people not being prepared emotionally, not being trained as servicemen and women, having to go up against people who have been trained. And although they're saying that a lot of the Russians have not had adequate food, they didn't have enough gas for their tanks and trucks because they thought they were going to be in and out. They were going to take over the country in a couple days. Now we're on week number 3 or 4, if that. And so they were talking about the trucks that were on the highway, 40 miles length. They are still sitting there. They're not going anywhere.
Right.
And then the other thing is, we kept hearing about this quote unquote no-fly zone. And the United States and Poland had figured out that the way they can get around that was that the United States was going to provide planes, like the Polish were going to give the Ukrainians their planes, and the United States would give Poland substitute planes to refurbish their air force. But they're both concluding that if they do that, that Russia is going to say that that's a declaration of war.
Right.
But
Right.
Russia has also said that the hitting them financially is also a declaration of war. So the big question is, what is the President Putin going to do to go beyond saying it's a declaration of war? What can he do, Louise? At this point, what can he do?
I think that that's where we are right now. That there is discussion within the White House with people who are trying to make a plan, but they're concerned about creating a major war effort. Something that looks like the United States is acting war against the Russians.
Right.
Because the Russians would then have to turn around and start fighting us in different locations, and that could be sad, and that could be inappropriate in some way. So right now, the decision has not been made about using the fly equipment, but they're definitely talking about it in the White House. I'm sure of that.
Well, if the United States got involved, and quite frankly, and again, I don't know for sure, but quite frankly, I have to believe there's a lot of PR. There's a lot of talk about what the United States is going to do, what we can't do. There's a lot of talk about what the Soviets can do, what they can't
Right.
do. But a
Right.
lot of the things that they're saying that they can't do, I actually believe they're already doing. That
Hmm.
that that they're using a certain language and a certain strategy of communicating with all of us, all the while they're preparing to do what they said that they can't do.
Right. Hmm.
Right? And anybody who plays checkers or chess or any games
Hmm.
where you have to try to manipulate your opponent, the United States is in this. There's no question in my mind. We are in it. We are just not doing what obviously could ratchet up the
Hmm.
response from the Soviets. For example, would Putin actually use a nuclear weapon knowing that we would have to respond? Is because basically what Putin would be saying is, I don't mind being the person to push the button to end my life and to end the life of my children and my mistress. And there's a part of me that says, I don't think he'll do that because he's hiding his mistress. He's hiding his children
Hmm.
from the lady that is his mistress and his former wife. So if he
Right.
cares for them to the point where he is trying to put them in a place of safety, would he press the button that would take him out, take her out, and the children? What do you think?
I don't know about what he would do with his family, but I do know that he's a multi-billionaire, that he owns three homes and he owns a cruise ship. And he has a lot of ability to move around. So if he makes a decision and says, do it, and move someplace, I think he'd move to a place that was safe for him.
Louise, is any place safe if we're talking about a nuclear war?
Well, I think if he ended up using a nuclear weapon, that would be a serious problem for everybody, for all the people in Europe.
Including him.
I mean, but
Including.
I think that he might find a way to get to avoid any problem for himself. I don't trust him at all. I really don't trust him
Right.
because he's done many things over the years, not just with Ukraine, but with other countries that have not been appropriate.
So the question is our, it's one thing for Washington, D.C., the Pentagon,
Hmm.
the senators, and the congressmen and women. It's one thing for all of them to be having their private talks and discussions. Okay, I hear that. But are we ready as a country? I mean, we're bemoaning the fact that we now have to pay $4 or $5 for gas.
Uh-huh.
It's for that's the least of our worries and concerns regarding the sacrifice that we would have to
Hmm.
make if there was a war. But with people complaining about the gas prices, it makes me feel like we're not ready for what could happen if we had to go to war. What do you think about that?
Hmm. Yeah, and I really think that some of the increases in the gas are inappropriate, that they should have been lesser.
I don't understand that. I don't understand what you just said.
I'm just thinking that some of the gas prices that are being increased in different parts of the country are being increased quickly, every day. That they shouldn't be doing it. They shouldn't be doing it. And it's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary.
But aren't we paying more money for a barrel of oil now than we were 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago?
Yes, we are, but we're not. We haven't. we don't buy that much gas or oil, and we have oil in our country that we can work on producing and using ourselves.
So are you saying that you think, or you would conclude, that the gas prices are going up because the the people who are selling the gas, those proprietors, are basically jacking up the price because of what's going on? They don't really need to. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Is that
I
the
think that they,
accusation?
no, it's not an accusation. I think that what it is that they need money for other things in their business, not just allowing people to come and buy gas. That every business in America that has any connection at all with Russia is losing money and needs money to pay their staff, to do a lot of different things that they don't have the money for.
Yeah.
So they're increasing the gas.
Well, going back to mental health in your neighborhood, are there people around you, including your family, that you have spoken with or that have spoken to you about what's happening, about how they're feeling about it? Are there people around you who have expressed fear, or are there people around you who are ready to do what the government would need to have done in the event that this thing escalated even all the more?
Actually, most of the people near me have told me that they're very angry with Putin in Russia, and they want the United States to do whatever they can do to help the Ukraine and to help those people and those children, so that there'll be less people being killed and bombed. I mean, their homes are bombed, their schools are bombed, their churches are bombed. I mean, even if they can go back to the Ukraine, do you know what it's going to cost them to rebuild their country?
Well, that's the other thing that I've been thinking is let's say 2 million people have left the Ukraine, and more are leaving. If Russia were to take over the entire Ukraine and 2 or 3 million people have left, I don't have the total population of those in the Ukraine. And if I were to ask Pastor Hobbs, he would say, "Don't get me to lying." But who's going to be there for the Soviet Union to control? Are people from the Soviet Union going to move into the Ukraine and populate it if there's no population there?
Well, the population in the Ukraine right now is predominantly men in the ages of 18 through 60. So I don't really know the number who are there, but I do know that their purpose is to protect the Ukraine to any degree they can.
Right, and I don't know, when you talk about rebuilding, I don't know if people would come back, because if they came back, and if it was the Russians who were controlling it, they don't want to be under that rule.
Right.
So there's nothing to be gained by coming back, other than if he had a business. But I wouldn't want to come back.
Well,
go ahead.
I just want to add something else to our conversation, and that is that in places like the city of Boston, where there have been large numbers of hundreds and hundreds of people standing in front of the State House with signs opposing Putin.
Right.
There's a combination of Russian people and Ukrainian people who are together. So they're in agreement with each other. And they're together. So I think that there's a lot that might happen that we don't know about yet.
Well, I am very very concerned about what's going on, and quite frankly, I don't even have the emotional capacity to as thoroughly invest myself, my thinking in this.
Hmm.
I think right now with this broadcast, I'm more reactionary than I am coming up with strategy for what our country should do, or for
Hmm.
what we should do. Again, I think I mentioned this in one of my broadcasts that I looked and found that there were two Ukrainian churches in Jamaica Plain,
Hmm.
and I was feeling that black pastors needed to reach out to them. One, because of some of the racial strife that we learned about in the Ukraine, and two, just to show some solidarity, or maybe
Right,
the black
right.
churches could begin a clothing drive or
Hmm.
something, some way of helping the Ukrainians. But because of some other pressures on me at this time, I can't take that on and carry that.
Hmm.
But I felt that the clergy in Boston and Massachusetts could be doing a lot to assist families in the Ukraine. And I'm also told that the president said for those Ukrainians who need a place that the United States has opened, that they'll be welcomed to come to the United States, and those who are
Hmm.
here at this point can stay. Is that
Well,
true?
yeah. Yes, I have heard that, but but prior to that, I have heard a number of people have been raising money, clothing, medication, packaging it, and sending it to the Ukraine.
Right, right.
You
Well,
know, so it's so they, and then there were just a couple of days ago, there were two women, I think, who had come from Ukraine originally, and they had developed um, packages of things that they thought were necessary and needed, and the number of six like backpacks, and they were transferring themselves from the United States to the right where Poland is, so that they can pass out this stuff that they've collected.
could you
So there are lots of people trying to do something for people over there.
can you speak to me about the quote unquote foreign legion, the men and women who are saying that they were going to consider uh, jumping into this army of of freedom fighters, men and women who have had
Mm-hmm.
experience in the armed services, and they were going to come together, and whether it's mercenaries or what, we're going to come together to fight over in the Ukraine. Do you know anything about that? Did you hear about
No,
that?
I haven't heard anything about that. The only thing I've heard that relates to that concept is people who originally came from Russia or originally came from the Ukraine who want to go back and help to stop what's going on now. I
Right.
haven't heard that Americans just want to go and do it.
And I also heard that Vladimir Putin had said that he was going to hire, not that he said it, but it was being stated that he had um, men and women coming from Syria, from other countries to fight with the Russians, with his armed team. Have you heard that? And these people are ruthless. They were saying.
Yes, I have heard something about that because there is something else going on that Russia has to take care of that doesn't have to do with this issue in the Ukraine.
I don't know what that means. What do you mean? It's something else that Russia has to do.
Well, Russia's involved with Syria, and Ukraine is not.
So those fighters that they're talking about will be paid, and
Hmm.
that they are more ruthless than the Russian soldiers, and the Russian soldiers, I'm sure, are committing all kinds of war crimes,
Hmm.
because Putin has been embarrassed at the national level and the international level because he thought he would have taken over the Ukraine right now, that the leaders of the Ukraine would have bowed to
He
him.
thought he was going to get it right away in a
Right,
few days.
right.
Hmm.
And as they said, that ain't happening. That didn't happen.
No, it's not
So
happening.
so do you think that Putin will ratchet this up, and if so, what would that look like? What do you think he would do?
I really don't know because I don't trust him. I don't like him, but I'm not sure what he's capable of doing that could be worse than what he's doing right now.
Well, nuclear weapons is one, and
Mhm.
I don't know much about nuclear weapons, so I can't really speak to
Mm.
what that would look like. But we're hearing that he indicated that obviously we know that he has them, and that he would actually use them, and he can be more ruthless with the killing, aggressively killing, as we're seeing. Children and their parents are being killed in the streets. It's
I know that that's the thing that is so unbelievable about his activity, and that's that he has no concern about mothers and children and even babies.
right, right, right. And I'm sure his response would be, "We're fighting a war. Um, these people are in the way. We're not targeting them, but this is what happens in war." But
Hmm.
do you know anything when they talk about war crimes? Do you know anything about what constitutes a war crime? Because I do not, and
Well,
neither does Pastor Hobbs.
I don't really know, but I do know that my father served in World War II.
Okay,
His brother served in World War II. His sister served in World War II. She was one of the first women in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to sign up with the um, military.
okay,
And I have two sons who are veterans. One is a Marine that went to Vietnam, and the other one that that you have met, Joe. Joe was on a cruise ship for the military in the let's see, Navy. He was in the Navy,
okay.
and so what they were directed to do, they were very careful about what they told their mother because they were concerned that I would know something that they were doing, they were ordered to do
Yeah.
because they didn't want to kill other people. But what I heard about Vietnam was the people who were being followed in the jungle by the Americans were also military. It wasn't women and children. So it seemed to me to be different than in Vietnam. And it probably would have been different for my son Joe on the aircraft carrier that he was on, that he had to repair the engine of the plane when they landed and took off. And there were things that he learned when he went on land, but he was very careful not to tell me what he was trained to do.
Right, right. Well,
And
what?
yeah, so I think that, you know, that was specific and like suggesting that we send American troops to the Ukraine right now to help them is not going to do anything except assume that we would increase the war.
So, what do you think that the average person should do if they're feeling overwhelmed? They're feeling fear has set in, anxiety. What do you? And that's the average citizen. What do you think they
Mm-hmm.
should do?
Well, I think that they should get connected with organizations that are raising funds or raising things that are needed by the people in the Ukraine,
Yeah.
and maybe they can participate in that.
And
You know, they they can participate themselves in that, and that would be better than just sitting at home watching TV, becoming more anxious.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is not over yet, and
Hmm.
when I when I watch some of the news media, one of the claims of CNN is that they say they not only cover the news, number one, but they say that their news correspondents are actually there, and and that's true. A lot of
Hmm.
their
Some of them are. I see
right,
them. Yes.
and they're, in my opinion, they're not they're not at a hotel looking out over the city and talking about what's happening. They're right there. They're in the
Hmm.
neighborhoods. They're where the shells are where the shells are landing. I've seen a couple
Hmm.
who have risked their lives. I don't know how they do that. I don't know, and because there are a lot of women over there covering this, and as a man, and this may not be um, in keeping with where our society is at,
Hmm.
but I would
Hmm.
have a tendency to want to protect a woman from the potential of death, whether they be service women or whether they be the Ukrainians who are just family people. I would want to
Hmm.
protect them. And when I see the reporters and the civilians and the females in the service, it creates some anxiety in me because other than those who are in the service, the others do not really know how to defend themselves against an
I
aggressive
know.
army that will shoot
Hmm.
at them, fire missiles at them,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
one of the other things they were saying about the Russians too, I saw something where they were saying that the bodies were actually being disintegrated right in the street. That they had some kind of a truck that they could
Oh.
open the truck,
Oh.
put the bodies in, and it was the Russians that they had a truck where they can put the bodies in the truck and incinerate them so that they don't have to deal with the body count piece. Did you hear that one? Did
No,
you?
I didn't, and I was thinking that it would be shocking and offensive for the number of Russian soldiers who were killed to send them back home to be buried.
Right. Well, they can simply say that their bodies were consumed by
Oh.
the bombs.
Oh.
There are all kinds of things that they can say, but they were saying they didn't want a body count. They felt that the body count was going to be counterproductive, so they have these containers that it's attached to a truck, and the bodies go in and they're disintegrated. That that to me was shocking, because that was,
Yes.
for me, that was a lack of respect for a human body. That was a lack of
Absolutely.
respect for
Yeah.
humanity, in my
Hmm.
opinion. And but they said this is what they are doing, and they're not even able they're not even able to pick up the bodies of the civilians. They're just lying in the street. That's to
I
go
know.
from
I know.
just living your life and walking to the corner store, riding your bike to your friends lying in the street dead. I don't know how families are going to recover from this. I really don't.
Yeah, I know it. I've heard stories from people about things that happened to them many years ago, but we're now looking at hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of people who have a negative experience to talk about if they survive. If they survive. I'm not sure everyone that's there, the Ukrainians plus the Russians, if they're all going to survive.
Well, for the Russians, I don't know if you saw this. There were Russian soldiers who had abandoned the fight. They walked away from it, and they were all at one place together talking about what they were going to do. They had walked away from the fight, and they deserted because they were saying we were not told that this is what we were going to do,
Right.
and we haven't eaten in so many days, and we do not have any fuel, and quite frankly, it's cold over there right now.
Yeah.
Right, there's
Right.
snow
And
over there. I don't know
I've
how.
seen snow. I've
Right.
seen snow.
I
Yeah.
don't know how cold it actually is over there, but that's that is trauma, and because this is mental health in your neighborhood, this is the second week with you maybe that I've talked about this. I've done 3 weeks with the three
Mm-hmm.
young men broadcasts. It's on my heart. It's on my mind. And on one of the broadcasts, I have a retired chaplain who is very knowledgeable of the armed
Mm-hmm.
services, and he is really giving us cutting edge, very precise, accurate
Right.
content regarding what's happening over there. He has all the terminology that I don't have,
Mm-hmm.
and he's educating Dr. Stephen Davis and I and our listeners regarding what could be done, what should be done, and how
Right.
this whole thing could be played out. We have 4 minutes left, Louise. You did it again. You just talked us for an entire hour almost. I just don't know how you do this week to week.
I know. Well, that's because I invite you to be my co-host.
Oh, can you say that again? I want Pastor Hobbs to hear that. You invited
I
who?
want. I want invite you to be my co-host.
Okay. I just wanted Pastor Hobbs to hear that.
Now, who's doing the engineering?
Well, with limitations, Pastor Franklin Hobbs.
Aha!
See,
Ah!
I was actually going to do the engineering and the broadcasting because I've made for this, but I decided that I wanted
Pastor
to.
Hobbs. Pastor Hobbs is important to me because he and I have
Hey,
been to
hey,
Africa.
Vay, hey, Vay. There you go. Traveling companions. I can't win. I try.
We've been to
Hey,
Thailand and
Vay.
Africa together.
Hey, Vay.
And I'll be back next week with somebody else or with my co-host.
Oh, you hear that? I'll be back with somebody else. You hear that? Yeah, that's cold. Well, we are the uniqueness of the technology. We are broadcasting on Zoom, and the Zoom broadcast is being sent to all of our platforms, and it's working
Great.
effectively. So I'm hoping that people will be able to listen to you and I reflect, that we're reflecting on what's
Well,
happening in the world.
this is the first experience I've ever had for my broadcast, Mental Health in Your Neighborhood, to be on Zoom.
Well, Louise, I think you've
And,
got it.
and that's because of you. It's because of you.
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
Mhm.
You've got the when you go into Howard Johnson's, they have ice cream of many flavors, right? There's many,
Uh-huh.
and they say try the many flavors. And at Boston Press Radio and TV, Boston Black News, WBPG LP 102.9 FM radio, sound like Pastor Hobbs. We have so many different flavors of media outlets. You've got to try all of them. And so,
Yes.
of course,
Yes.
Pastor Hobbs couldn't have thought that up and come up with that kind of terminology, but I did. Pastor Hobbs, I appreciate your engineering today. You've done a, a fairly decent job. And
Yes.
Louise, I thank you for allowing me to be your guest. I just look forward to this on Wednesdays. My when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about my broadcast, Louise. I think about being here.
Ah, great, great. Well, the
You don't think that I
advantage,
lie, do you?
uh, well,
Listen,
some,
Louise's phone was ringing, and she was really trying to complain about me taking my phone. She's looking at her
ah,
phone right now to see who's calling.
I just hung up,
Oh,
but I wanted to remind the listeners what a what a great respect I have, Pastor Bruce, for your technology, for your ability to do the things you're doing.
well, I some people speak in tongues, and they're terrible at technology, Pastor Hobbs, and others do not speak in tongues, but they have the talent of working with the technology. Bruce Wall,
Hmm.
and there are
Well,
others who can't do any of it. Louise Carcione.
well, that's why I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate the fact that God is blessing all of us because it's all of our personalities coming together on this station that is making it
Yes,
what it has
exactly.
become. Let me say this with 1 minute to go. Yeah, I'm going completely away from mental health in your neighborhood. I'm going to something else. There was a radio station in New York City, WLIB, 1190 AM, the
Hmm.
premier gospel station in New York City. And I was trying to pull our radio station up this morning on something called TuneIn Radio. WLIB used to be on TuneIn Radio, and I found
Hmm.
out that they're not on it anymore, and that they have had a major transition because
Oh,
of not having the finances. This was the number one gospel station in New York City. So the fact that
mhm.
we have been going for 12 years under the leadership of Renee Wise, I think is something for us to thank God for
Yes,
because we're
yes.
still in existence and we're doing very well. So Louise,
And
I'll give you the
we're
last minute.
blessed.
We're
We're
blessed, and
blessed.
we are blessed, and I'm blessed more than
Yeah,
any of you.
we're
Okay,
blessed.
so
Okay.
I'll give you the last minute.
Okay. So for the last minute, I want to thank you for sharing everything that you shared on the broadcast. And I want to thank Pastor Hobbs for being available in case anything didn't go right. And I want to thank Deacon Wise, who's always helping in the background, but we don't see her on the screen. And I will be back next week. Bye.
Bye bye, Louise. Louise, I'm going to call you in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, bye bye.